It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking about the very latest in property news as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, also Apple Podcasts and Amazon across your weekend. Up to a Sunday, the second day of June. Tell you what, you'll probably remember where you were on May the 31st, the day that Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 felony counts by a New York jury after Trump became the first US president to be convicted of a crime. Of course, it now remains to be seen whether it is going to make a difference in the November elections in the US. It was also another very busy week for us. Kicked it off on Monday. We spoke to Tapere Hewett, who is a mortgage advisor in New Zealand, about the dramatic steps taken by the New Zealand government to stop all first home buyers grants, which was quite significant. We also caught up with Simon Kuestenmacher, spoke about the modular homes and building at scales. That was a pretty interesting conversation. Matthew Hughes, he was here talking about Perth and the Oxford report. And we also caught up with Cook and Nick Buick about management rights and some of the key things to understand. So that kind of formed most of our week. Certainly hope you've got a great day lined up on your Sunday.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey on the Real Estate Podcast.
We are discontinuing the government's first home grant scheme, which saves $245 million over the next 4 years. The First Home Grant is a program that ultimately we think, in comparison to social housing places, is lower value expenditure at a time when the social housing waitlist has 25,000 families on it, and we have a big demand for New Zealanders in need. We've had to make the tough, but I think the right decision to discontinue the First Home Grant. So people that are pre-approved and approved, we will honour. And if you get pre-approval, that can last for up to 6 months. So if you've gone through the system and you've been approved for a first home grant, or been pre-approved, or you've currently got approval and you're going out there and looking for your first home, that can last for up to 6 months. All of those will be honoured.
And then there are those who are building new homes who had their settlement date pushed out, who qualified for the $10,000 new build grant, who now have been left out in the cold, unable to settle on their home.
I had already signed my contract in March and was really just waiting for it to be ready. It's an awful way to find out. I was so shocked, and I called my mum and I was crying on the phone to say, how am I going to make this work? One stage I was working 2 jobs to get rid of debt. I've always been a worker. I've been studying as a solo parent, and it's been a 3 to 4 year plan to get to this point, and it's awful to have this now potentially be ripped away. It's a huge shock, and it's so stressful to now have to potentially think about how to come up with that difference in my deposit.
So that piece was from News Hub last week. How incredibly frustrating. You can hear it in the voice. What I don't understand, though, is if you're going to suddenly stop it and somebody has already commissioned the build is already happening and some money has already gone to the builders, how is it that $10,000 for a new build is not being guaranteed by the government? I don't understand that.
And neither do we. And we would hope that the government would put a lot more thought around this, and that if people have sell and purchase agreements in the pipeline, they've confirmed contracts, we would hope that they would still continue to honour this until the settlement is complete.
Now, as a mortgage broker, as you say, you're dealing with your clients who absolutely depend on the grant. I mean, you must have been in the last few days acting like a grief counsellor, because at the best of times or the worst of times, we know that mortgage brokers are always having to hold the hand of their clients, none more so than first home buyers. And to be treated in this way and to be told that it's only 4%, I can imagine that this has been absolutely shattering for people.
Yes, absolutely. It is very shattering for people, completely out of touch. They're saying 4%, it's only 4%. Well, that absolute 4% is the difference between somebody getting on the property ladder and someone not getting on the property ladder. So, yes, this government is absolutely out of touch. So what we're doing with our clients is we are having to almost counsel them and reassure them that we will get through this process together. And, we are liaising with our lenders to see if there's anything they are going to assist with. At the same time, in touch with Kāinga Ora to see what help there is out there for people who already have contracts in the pipeline. So they need to honour these, otherwise they're going to, if they don't settle in time with the deposit required, then unfortunately they're not going to meet settlement. They could potentially be sued.
Let's explore together the power of real estate. We keep you better informed and updated.
Will there be a different model for everyone being housed through new modular, affordable housing? I think that modular, with all the AI, this could be really quite revolutionary, particularly once we hit 2040 and those next 10 years thereafter.
Yes, let's be quite honest. Go out to any greenfield development site in this country and have a look at the housing as it goes up and ask yourself, is this the best way to build houses? With the collective intelligence of mankind put together, is this the best way? And you'd say it probably isn't. There must be a way to be doing this cheaper and faster and more environmentally friendly. A building site has material wastage of around 25% or something stupendous like this. If you plonk all of the development into a factory, so I think of it as factory-built housing rather than prefab housing or whatever the name is. We're running out of workers. That's an underlying narrative. Is as we are shrinking the working age population, we have a crazy skills shortage in all of those construction trades, and we are wasting the limited time of our tradies by them driving from one building site to the next. That is a waste of time. Build the house in a modular fashion in a factory. You minimize material waste. And of course, you could then build housing with the aid of machinery. You could then have technicians on site, but also less skilled labor. So it's easier to get the workforce happening. And at the moment, what we're doing in the modular space is just the beginning. Once somebody with endlessly deep pockets, and I'm looking at the super funds here, really gets serious about investing into factory-built housing, that should drive down construction costs. That is, of course, only the construction of a house. We still have to pay for the land. We still have to build the infrastructure that goes to the land, and we still need to change the tax system to make sure that housing goes up faster. There is more parts to building a house than just the actual house, but the building cost, that must be revolutionized. We're building housing essentially the same way than we did them 100 years ago, and that's quite frankly dumb. We must move housing from the construction sector into the manufacturing sector.
I'll tell you who is doing it a little bit at scale at the moment, these pods, is in China. You can purchase something that, they've got different sizes, 20, 30, 40 square metres. They've got everything. They're highly, highly spec'd. I don't know what they're selling for. And apparently people from all corners of the world are buying these pods.
Yeah, and these pods are great solutions for, to squeeze in a little bit of housing in the backyard type of stuff. That's perfect. It's a ready-made solution, a certain kind of work camp on construction sites, on mining sites. They can absolutely benefit from this type of housing stock. So all the power to these type of offerings, but they are, in a sense, cookie-cutter solutions. When I talk about factory-built housing, I'm talking about architects who know what a factory can do do, and they can design each and every single wall, so to speak, to their specific specifications, and then the house just gets Legoed together on site. If you look at your own house, it is something like 20 different walls and 3-4 different roofing elements. That's about it. And so in theory, you should be able to deconstruct this house, in an IKEA type thing, and then build it on site. And there are elements that suggest how can we build this type of housing actually on site, meaning how can the factory exist on site? The factory doesn't need to be at one fixed place. The factory could move to site as well.
I like your thinking, Simon. You've got all the first home buyers really excited, saying, why are we not living in the future? This sounds great.
Yeah, to be quite frank, I think probably the last 10 years and probably the next 10, 15 years is probably a window of disadvantage for first home buyers. I do think that housing is such a big unsolved issue in this country, and the sheer fact that there is a morning property podcast that talks about this on a very regular basis means it is an issue that needs solving. And it's naive to think that we wouldn't do anything about it as a country, as a society. So we will be doing this. So I think in the long run, you could say this is probably a 25-year unfortunate window that we are in at the moment. But after this, I think we should be able to improve the output of housing and therefore make it cheaper and more affordable.
Gain insights with exclusive conversations from real estate professionals about buying, selling and investing across Australia.
But some commentators are suggesting that the start of a slowdown is on. Now, question for you this morning, are you seeing that slowdown in any way?
Look, if we're talking about the rental side, we've seen a bit more stock come to market. So on that side, we have seen less people at home opens. The rate of rental growth is slowing. And I think that's more likely to hit an affordability ceiling before the sales side. On the sales side, I think it's still trending in the opposite direction. We're seeing stock levels continue to drop. We're down at just over 3,400 properties on the market now, and transaction levels last week were nearly 1,000. And then we read a report from a far more reputable source than the last one we discussed, from Oxford Economics recently. And their forecasts were a lot more in line with our expectations on what we think is going to transpire in Perth in the coming years. And it did predict that rental growth will begin to slow, which we're seeing already. The forecast of the property price growth, on the other hand, was quite astounding.
Yes, and just sticking with Oxford, because you've got more information about the Perth forecast that they have done, and it is stating what Perth is likely to achieve in coming years.
It is. And look, they've projected some growth around other capital cities as well, but specifically around Perth, they're talking about it continuing to be in the standout capital for price growth all the way through to 2027. And at the same time, they're suggesting that Sydney may have reached peak unaffordability, while Perth is still one of the most affordable capitals despite the recent growth in the country. So their data showed that in Sydney, it would require an amazing 56% of gross household median income to service a typical 30-year mortgage. And that's compared with Perth at the moment only requiring 34%, and the national average sitting at 46%. So despite the growth that we've had, we've come off such a low base that we're still very, very affordable. And even with the projected growth from Oxford, they're still suggesting that we're going to be one of the most affordable capitals, even in 2027.
Yeah, so management rights, at their essence, they're a business. So you purchase it with it as if it were a business. But it's a business comprised of a few different components. The main one being the caretaking agreement. So in Queensland, those agreements with the body corporate to look after the building, make sure it doesn't fall down and do all of the things affiliated with caretaking that building, that forms the core of the management rights asset. And then there's also a letting business that exists as well there. So that's how a manager can derive commission from managing lots inside that complex. And then often there's also a real estate component to it, but be that either an office or an on-site lot that the manager can reside in as well. So there's three basic components that make up a management rights.
I always like to say, in essence, management rights is it's the business behind running strata-titled properties. So any high-rise or townhouse complex where you've got units owned by multiple owners, management rights is the on-site management behind schemes such as that.
Okay, and we should really look at the numbers when it comes to management rights. So can you give us some stats for our listeners to digest and better understand the size and also the scale of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an in-house analyst, and we've started putting out an annual management rights report, which gives some stats on the overview of the industry. But it's a much larger industry than most people realise. Probably the total value of management rights businesses in Australia is around about 5 billion. The model essentially runs about 4,000 strata schemes across Australia, probably about 250,000 lots under management, whether they be apartments, houses, or townhouses. Our rough estimate is that the industry probably employs between 30 and 35,000 people, and they manage assets probably totaling around about 120 billion. It's a very significant industry.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.